Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. This is part 2 of my interview with the Improv Doctor himself, David Charles, wherein I subject him to my Proustian improv questionnaire and we follow where that leads. If you haven't yet, you should buy his book, The Improv Dictionary, which you can find wherever good books are sold, or check out his website, improvdoctor.com, and you can find links to purchase it there as well. And now, I hope you enjoy part 2 of Dr. David Charles' Improv Autopsy. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit, and I have a kind of a Proust questionnaire for you.
Cool.
So we can spend as much or as little time on these as you'd like, but it's kind of my, inside the actor studio type of...
no, love it. Game. I'm game. I'm always worried all of my answers are going to be improv-based, and your listeners are going to be like, this guy needs to get a life.
Well, no, they're all improv-related, so...
Okay. Well, then I'm much less nervous.
Yeah.
As long as I don't have to reveal anything about myself, Steve. You've worked with me. I am a closed book. That's a joke for anyone who has ever met me. I could not be more open. But yes, Proust away.
Yeah, so improv-related Proust questionnaire. Proust-esque questionnaire.
Love it.
David, what is your favorite get for?
In the short form tradition, lately it's become something has just happened before the lights go up on the scene. What has just happened in this world or to these characters? I love that because it just throws us into the mix. In a long form setting, it's getting a story of significance from an audience member.
Okay, so more a longer suggestion than...
So like last night, the prompt was, what is a moment that someone opened the door to community for you? And then someone told us a story that met that criteria. And it gave us a really lovely story about a high school student and their teacher. And the student found that she had a passion and an aptitude for carpentry and building, which was something that she never would have recognized. So we just got this beautiful, rich story. And of course, that particular story appeals to me as an educator because there's always this secret fear underneath what we're doing that we've made no difference to anyone ever in decades. So hearing like a student say something nice about a teacher is like, oh, thank you.
What is your least favorite suggestion?
I fear this will be what everyone is saying. It's the litany of things that we get when audience members are thinking they're being clever. So gynecologist and related, where you're just like, all right, and then you have to push that aside and try to get the next thing. So I think it'd be anything in that sort of category where the audience member thinks they're being funny and that no one in the hundreds of years of improv has ever thought to yell that out in a public setting before. Oh, that and jumping off the Eiffel Tower with a bunch of just to give us some callback.
Yeah. Not everyone has said that, which has been interesting, but I agree with you. And so how would we categorize that? Is that a suggestion where the audience member is trying to be funny?
Yeah, I suppose in strict improv dictionary language, it would be a gag. They're just telling the gag. There's no intention of setting you up for success. It's almost the opposite. We had a moment like that in a recent show with John Hunter, one of your other guests. We were doing a scene 3 ways, and I like to do the styles with the initials, where you get the 3 initials and you get styles that base with that. So we had G, and it's like, okay, what's a style with this? And a cis white male, couldn't see him, I'd win the bet, yells out, gay! And just a really negative tone as the style. And I'm really proud of sort of the ensemble we play in, because without skipping a beat, I was just all right, LGBTQ, great, that we'll take it. And so he yelled it out with the intention to demean or to be mean-spirited. And then me and John just played it straight. That's an ironic way of saying we were playing that scene. And it ended with a tender kiss between the two of us. And I was like, I played with John for 21 years, and I think that's the first time we've ever kissed on stage. And it was funny that not only did we kiss, but it wasn't a comedic man-on-man kiss. It was anything other than that. Because you remember the days of SAC when that was exactly the only kind of kissing that would happen on stage, would be a man on a man for a comedic moment. And so if I can, I like to take the thing that's meant as marginalizing from the audience, and I like to shed light on it in a way, I shouldn't say that shames the audience member, but on a bad day, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. It's I'll take that and I'll show you 2 loving men on stage without any commentary, and you're welcome. Yeah.
That's the educator in you. You want to educate the audience member.
Oh, I know, but when you say it like that, it doesn't sound like a good thing, Steve. But we've not talked about empathy, though, and I do think that's what we do and teach, though. And I think, okay, so I do think, yeah, no, that is the educator in me. So when someone yells something like that out, for me, it's a charge to be like, all right, let's dig and be careful as improvisers here and not give them the comedy they were expecting. Let's give them something much more nuanced.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that in a
No,
bad way.
I know you.
Okay.
No, yeah, no, I know. It's funny though because I think, in some ways, my frivolity in the academic world can be dismissed easily. It's like, oh, you've got a PhD and you study improv, like that can easily be dismissed. And sometimes, I think I do get self-conscious about my intellectualism in the improv world because it can feel very high culture and it can feel condescending. So I do feel a bit between in terms of those worlds sometimes.
Yeah, I do love that approach to those suggestions though, because it's easy to just dismiss, and some of them you have to, just because of the nature of what they are. I mean, you can only do so much with dildo.
Yeah.
And that doesn't offer the same type of opportunity that Suggestion You Got does in terms of being able to provide a scene that is wholesome and not what was expected or called for.
And that also goes to the content parameters at SAC. We generally, with the exception of the P. Sparkle show, we're generally a PG-13-esque kind of venue. I talk about this a lot with my campus troupe as well. I also think training in a PG-13 way is so empowering because you can always sprinkle in a little bit of X-rated material. That's so easy to do. But you can see improvisers who have only performed in that style squirming when suddenly they're in a venue where it's in front of the PTA, and that you can just see them struggling to come up with anything because they have to censor every dirty thought that they're having. So that's just my preference as a player.
Okay, side question. This isn't part of the thing, but when we were watching that show the other day, when Robbie was looking at the swing that you had seen painted, or maybe it was the whole house, he was like, well, this is shit. And it was a few beats later, maybe it was even in a song, that then you repeated it, and Kayla was like, oh, she's like, David was supporting him in that choice, even though it wasn't necessarily completely a SAC thing. You were like, okay, if we're there, and we're going to do it. But I didn't know if you remembered that or what was going through your mind, because that isn't typically a SAC word.
No. Like, I think current management has you can drop one F-bomb in the 9 o'clock, and I hate that because I'm like, all right, now there's a scramble. It's funny because you'd said you'd found it on YouTube, and we're talking in the pre-interview that I didn't realize it was on YouTube. So that made me track it down, and I actually watched it last night. And that moment stood out to me. I think my attitude with swears in particular is if it's earned, it's earned. It's if it's lazy and casual. That's when it bothers me. And like that was two brothers dealing with the death of their grandfather and their estrangement from each other. And like it had such a power when he said it. So I don't know if that's quite a kind reading of that moment from you and Kayla. I think for me it may have been more just a case of matching Robbie's vulnerability because I really think he's one of Orlando's treasures in terms of as an actor. The fact that he's an actor, a Shakespearean actor, a musical theatre actor, an improv actor, a theme park actor, which is all of those things, but some people think of it as separate. He brings all of that to the stage. I'm like, all right, he's bringing that. I will match with that. Yeah.
It makes sense what you said about going Eugene O'Neill for that as well, for bringing some of that to the scene that you were doing. It made sense for it to be there. It wasn't jarring in that way at all. It was just like, oh, that's not something you typically hear at SAC.
No, absolutely. And I think we've talked a bit about this in other chats as well. I think I'm always trying to walk that line carefully at SAC, but just in general when I do shows at the Annie Russell Theatre and stuff as well, that I'm trying to honour what subscribers or general audience members are anticipating, but I am also trying to push envelopes in productive and interesting ways. And that may not always work. But it's funny that moment stood out for you because I understand, especially with your history with SAC and your distance from SAC for the last many years, actually, unfortunately for us, that probably did feel very unsacky in that moment.
Describe your onstage persona. Is onstage David different from real life David?
Oh God, he's even more neurotic. He is even more foreign. I do think I try to be David in all aspects of my life. I try not to wear masks too much in my life, but I do think it's almost maybe the most unadulterated version of me as well. Both in that true sense of the word, but maybe also in the unadulterated version of me, like the most childlike version, the most playful. I've often talked with students, like I've got 21 years of Rollins students now, and many of them have evolved into quite close friends, some of my best friends. And I'm like, I think they have seen parts of me because we've played together that my conventional colleagues just haven't. They just don't know those parts of me. And they're very playful parts, but they can actually also be very, very vulnerable parts. So at a moment, again, I was talking a bit about this rip show we did last night, so obviously that's the most recent improv, right? So it's the most fresh in my mind. But I was just doing a little side support finesse, placing a phone call, being the boss of Grace's character who is staying at home, and just apologizing to her, going, look, I'm sorry if you're feeling guilty. We want you back here. I want you to take the time that you need. And then I didn't think it or plant it, but I just suddenly said, because when I had my child, I didn't take paternity leave. And that's one of the biggest regrets of my life. I'm just in the character saying that. And I choked up because it is 1,000% my personal truth. 1,000%. But absolutely unengineered in that moment. Just me playing a character. And then again, to speak of the same community where the audience, berates me for a messy introduction, like several students came to me afterwards and in the most loving and generous way, like, I just want to check you're okay. And it's like, oh, that's the community. That's the community I want to exist in. So I think on stage David in some ways is my aspirational David. More playful, more vulnerable, more giving. And then probably also bad habit David probably sneaks in there too. And when I'm not sure that the audience gets me, then very foreign David comes out, right? It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a New Zealander, says the man who's lived here for 34 years of his life. Like, I think I am now 2/3 American officially, or very close, just by years in country.
I love that description of aspirational, because we talk about, you play a heightened version of yourself, but I love the idea of aspirational version of yourself. That resonates with me. I love it.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about the teacher part of me as well, and of you, I think there are also moments where you're looking at a show and you're like, oh, all our female presenting improvisers have been girlfriends and very controlled characters with no agency, and trying to have the wherewithal that if I've been part of that problem, that the next scene I'm going to be the Secret Service agent for Madam President, and I'm going to set up a colleague in a different kind of way. And I'd be a liar if I thought I managed that all the time. I most certainly do not. I can be giddy with the excitement of performance, and my excitement can make me be a little bullish. If I'm not careful, I can step on fellow improvisers' toes, because I believe in confidence and leading from strength, and sometimes in doing that you may overshadow a slightly more timid fellow player. I'm still growing and learning in the art, but I do like to challenge myself to have that slightly more aerial view, whether it's long form or short form, and going, okay, what are the patterns that I don't want to see unbroken?
Well, I think your handling of that suggestion, like we just talked about too, is very aspirational in terms of, I'm not going to present to you the world you think you live. I'm going to present to you the world as it should be.
Yeah, and the world I know, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, I think it's really hard to be on a stage with members of any community that happen to be our queer community and our queer colleagues and friends, but with any community, and being like, oh, I am doing you a disservice in this moment by playing into these really stale tropes. Do you remember the one game I won't play? I don't remember if this is in our years together or not, or if you have a recollection of this, because there is one short form game that I will not play at SAC, and I wonder if you remember what it is.
I don't.
All right, so this may jog a memory, or this may be post your years. Like, I will not play Dialect Roller Coaster, because I jokingly, and not jokingly, I call it stereotype cavalcade.
Yeah.
That because you get 10 or 15 seconds in any dialect, there is literally nothing you can do but play at the lowest point of your intelligence. You're grabbing for the lowest hanging fruit, and as you move out of colonial dialects into colonized dialects, everything you do will be problematic. And I'm just like, yep, that gives me a permanent ick. If you want to give me a dialect roller coaster, have me go from English to German to French to New Zealand to Australia, sure, I'll play those 5. But as soon as you lead me off that beaten path to people that I'm like, yep, I will poke fun of those 5. But I'm not going to poke fun of colonized cultures. I'm not going to poke fun of colonized peoples. That's just so icky coming from the cis white male of a certain age on stage. It's just icky.
That's interesting, because when you get to this for Richard, I only ask him, but I had it on here because I was actually going through the Actor Studio questions, trying to find what's something that'd be similar to that but improv related when I was doing these. And one of them that I had initially was, and I think when I wrote it, it was just, what's your favorite accent? And then when I posed it to Richard, I hope anyway, I said, if you're still doing them, what is your favorite accent? And then I don't even ask it. It's not even on my list anymore, because I was like, you know what? There's nowhere that goes that I want to explore necessarily.
Well, I think it's a whole episode, frankly, because I think it is one of the most contentious kind of aspects of representation on the improv stage at the moment. Whose accents do we have a right to as players? And because I've had moments, you asked me for a cringe story. I was in New Zealand. I had been in America for a while. So this is one of those cringe stories that could keep me up at night and make me drink if I let my mind circle around it. And because I'd been in America, like, I'd been a bit enculturated, but also there was a bit of in the gentlest sense, in those years in particular, I don't know if I'd call it an anti-Americanism in New Zealand so much as a pro-New Zealandism.
Okay.
Because America was trying to get nuclear vessels into New Zealand ports, and we were very staunchly anti-nuclear. So we were defining ourselves in many ways against America, while Australia was in many ways sidling closer and closer to America. So that just from a cultural perspective. And it was a short film scene, and I don't remember the premise, but I remember we were going into glowworm caves or something, and I would have been 19 maybe at this point, and I chose to be a loud, obnoxious American tourist going into the glowworm caves, and I really leant into it, and this is in front of a New Zealand audience. And meanwhile, now in retrospect, I understand what my partners were doing. They were trying to hush me and lean into the reverence of the moment and the beauty of the moment, and then in my mind, I'm like, oh, they're setting me up to do more. They want me to be more obnoxious. They want me to be more obstructionist to their gentle agenda. Like, I totally misread the moment and just leant into being more and more obnoxious. And it sat with me all these years, because this would literally be 34 years later. It just sat with me as a really critical learning moment that I was taking a pot shot. It wasn't a clever pot shot. It was like, oh, I'll be an obnoxious American in front of an audience of New Zealanders. Home run! Da, 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 you know. And instead it just came across as mean-spirited, as ugly, as insensitive to what the scene was actually doing. And that one has sat with me because it was such a stark moment in my young improv life that I'd like, I really failed there. I really failed there, and had like you were talking of your first mentor, like just had really good mentors, and always strong female improvisers in my early years as well. So I think that's always given zero traction to the awful slurs initially of unfunny women and the like. It's just like that's never had any traction with me whatsoever. But yeah, that moment sat with me.
Was it something that was said afterward that cemented that in your mind, or just the feeling of you had when you were doing it?
The way I remember it, because it was a while ago, Stephen, is an aura of disappointment in me. I don't think I could be more explicit than that.
Sure.
But being in a room thinking I'd done something good, and boy did I admire those early improvisers. I still do. I say it in the past tense. I still do. I think I haven't been in contact with Stacey Taylor or Martin Inwood Fallon or Patrick Davies. They were the core trinity. I haven't seen any of them for quite some time. But they were good people. They were just good people. And so just sitting in that space going, oh, I've disappointed them. I think that was really formative. And I think that's really important. Not that we disappoint each other, but that we hold each other accountable to those moments. And they weren't being mean about it, but I felt it. And in some ways that was harder. Like, as if that, just given that, what the hell was that, David? Cut it out. But like, pa-cha! You know? But it was like sensing the disappointment. And again, like we talk a lot about what we remember, what we don't remember. Bet you they don't remember that moment at all. You know, at all.
Yeah.
And that little lockbox of dark failures.
Yeah.
You made me think of dialects. Oh, but also Richard is an improviser of colour. There is greater freedom there for him in a dialectual kind of landscape, I think, than there is for me as well, right? And I think that's part of the difficult conversation, because unnuanced observers can be like, well, why does that improviser get to do a Jamaican and I don't? Do you know what I mean? It's like, shut up, that's why. Just shut up.
Well, and you always want to punch up. You don't want to punch down. Yeah.
And I like punching sideways. So in the book I wrote, I talk about punching sideways, which is the notion of you are your sideways. You're punching it that identifies in your hyphenates. It's like, these are the things I'm going to punch at.
Yeah.
As well as punching up. I think punching up, especially currently, we should be punching up. Because while we punch up in the current landscape, we are, in fact, punching down. You know? You feel free to edit that if you...
That's gold. David, what inspires you on stage?
First two things that leap to mind are love, like really feeling love on stage. I don't think there's anything like it, and that can be love for your fellow improviser. Like, there are moments that you just feel blessed to be playing with that person, and so that's the love that you're feeling, sort of the love for the craft and the relationship. But also seeing improvisers find love on stage, like in between their characters and the worlds that they're creating. I think that sits with me, and then connected to that would be the vulnerability that comes with that, because young improvisers, well, I say young improvisers, I think most improvisers are more comfortable yelling at each other on stage than they would be sitting closely and holding hands and leaning on each other. I'm not even talking about true sensual intimacy, that's a whole other situation, but seeing true friendship on stage, or seeing a really well-functioning marriage on stage, do you know what I mean? Those moments I think are really quite cool, because they are still too rare.
Yeah. It's also hard to get to them if you're focusing on the funny, because
Yeah.
you shy away from those tender moments.
And in the best nights and the best performances, it's your partner. Just the thing that's inspiring you is just your partner.
Yeah.
And maybe the audience and the greater environment certainly plays into that. But those are the moments, like with this R&D project with Robbie, that it's quite nerve-wracking going in, because we've made this commitment of we've never done this format before. And you know me well enough to know I am a rehearser. I believe in polish and rehearsal and slickness. Like, I don't think that's anathema to improv in the slightest. I think it can elevate it and open up whole new vistas. So there's something in that show that there are moments that show starts with Robbie, and then we'll get to the end of Act 1, and I'm like, oh, I've not been worried for 50 minutes. I've not been worried about, is this going to land, or what the next scene's going to be, or what the next move is. I've just been playing in this moment. And my mind often is thinking a few steps ahead. That's just how I work. But it's been doing so with such a fleeting, temporary quality that there's no ownership of any of those thoughts.
Yeah.
And if it happens, it happens. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to plant a shoebox. Great, yeah, let's see what happens with it. And then if it happens, it happens. Oh, and then, more story time with Uncle David, as I like to tell my students. So in the last R&D, we were doing, do you remember the game Options, Stephen? Like when you just go to the audience periodically through the scene and you go,
Yes.
hey. Yeah. So that was the one we expanded into a one act. And it became about two friends, and Robbie's character owned a brewery that had got money from his mother who'd passed, and that was his. I was his friend, but also his accountant, and things were clearly not going well. And then we go through a complicated series of events. We learn about his backstory, my backstory, and his mother. They both had really terrible relationships with their dads. Because comedy, what else would it be? But in the final moments of the show, Robbie makes this beautiful decision to burn down the brewery with a unopened shoebox of some things that his mother had left him, because he knew that they were going to have emotional baggage. And we're doing it as a musical because we just added that we love the music, and we added this conceit of, all right, for our last scene, this is the musical adaptation of the play that you've just been watching. That was the little conceit we came up with. And so I'd been his friend in that scene, but I decided to come and be the mother, because I think this audience gave us a song title of like Drunk Useless Men or something, you know. So that was the title, or something of that elk. And so I came out and it's like, you know what, I want to have one of those morph moments where I morph into the mother character again, because this had been her space and her world. So I became the mother, and I stepped into the burning, imaginary, well, of course,
yes.
Burning pile. And the audience titters and laughs because it looks like a comedic choice. And then in that moment, I just start singing about, I want you to be released of this burden. There's nothing good for you here. I don't want you to become like your father. I wasted my life. You know, like it becomes a really, and again, another unexpected moment that was just so inspired from what had happened. And I had nearly moved myself I just kept it together and didn't burst into tears and have my voice crack as the lights came down. And it was that, again, that magic of twisting the audience's expectation. They thought I was about to give them something a little silly and goofy, and instead tried to pull them into something much more heartfelt. And it all just came from sort of Robbie and what he had been doing prior to that moment. It's like, oh, I think he needs his mother to be part of this, and not at all preordained or engineered, just absolutely found from your partner. So,
yeah.
You know, it's almost like people have written about that in books, like the answers in your partner make your partner look good. Yeah.
You may have hinted at some of this already, or maybe even answered it, but what, if anything, shuts you down and takes you out of it on stage?
Oh, selfishness. When I feel an improviser trying to impress the audience.
Okay.
Or more concerned with that than being in the moment and creating with what's happening on stage. So it's a untrained awareness of the audience, actually. So that's really specific because it happens with just enough frequency that I can give it a name now. It's like, okay, you're trying to impress someone right now. And that's not to say we don't do impressive things on stage. Please give me a Shakespeare scene and I'll go to town on it. But I'm still trying to tell a story and involve my scene partner, right? That's always the priority. I'm not just trying to do that trick I do and get accolades. That's not the thing I'm trying to do at all.
Yeah. How do you shake off that? Get back into it.
Alcohol. I think it's tough because it's a little different when that pops up in a teaching environment, when I'm with students or with a newer ensemble member who are more open to feedback. I think it's much tougher when that behavior sneaks up with true colleagues because there's no gentle way to give that note, right? You know, like, hey, you were being selfish and you were trying to show off and do the thing that you do. And I imagine you can connect to that thought as well. Hopefully not with me, but maybe with me. Do you know what I mean? Where you're just like, you're on stage with someone and you're like, oh, your agenda isn't on the stage anymore. You're trying to do that thing. You're trying to do something for someone else. And I find it disorientating. So I think I just try to double down. And in my more selfless moments, I just try to give them space. It's like, all right, you do your thing. If I try to compete with you doing your thing, I'm just making things worse. And so then I try to lean back into narrative and story and relationship if I have the wherewithal to figure that out for myself.
Yeah. I think Jose's answer dovetails into yours, or might be the same in a lot of ways, because when I asked him that question, he said it was when someone upstages the audience by doing something an audience member had done because they can do it better. Which seems to be the same kind of motive, like a selfish motive to knowing that I can do this thing better than you just did, even though it probably took a heck of a lot more guts for you to do it, but I'm quote unquote better at it, so I'm going to do it just to prove that I'm better at it.
Yeah. No, I think that is dealing with a similar spirit. And I also think it's a beast that we all have to wrestle with. So we've talked a bit about Shakespeare improv. Obviously, if there's a Shakespeare scene pitched in the show, part of me is like, you know? And I'm likely to start the scene, but I'm trying to be very mindful in those moments that, I love turning phrases and doing iambic pentameter and all that spiffy stuff, but I have to tell a story and my partner has to be involved with it as well. And I just had one of those with John Hunter last weekend where we were just matching each other toe to toe, so it was just so freaking joyful. But I have to be careful that, because sometimes we'll throw an overlay onto a scene that we get from the host. At SAC, the host is responsible for giving us the games, and there's some games like First Line, Last Line and ABC games and stuff like that I like to put a style overlay on, and I have to be really careful that I'm not leaning the audience to give me the one I want that my scene partner isn't going to enjoy as much.
Yeah.
And that is a battle, because if you improvise for a while, you do start to go, okay, let's give Stephen this, let's give David that. You start to sort of know what your teammates excel at.
Right.
And you want them to look good, but boy, that's that fine line between looking good and shining in a way that is burning the others in the space, as opposed to warming and heating them. It's a fine line between those two things, and it is something I definitely wrestle with. I thought you were going to say, oh yeah, I was talking to one of our mutual friends, and he said, when you...
No.
When David Charles, explicitly when David Charles. Yeah.
You just remind me of this as well. Kayla likes to remind me of this every now and again, but it was in the studio, and I was calling, so I must have been one of the players on the other team, and it was either Gabe or was...
Bill Murray. The
Bill
answer is
Murray.
Bill Murray.
It was either Gabe or Bill Murray.
I'm just going to say Adam Scharf, just as a possibility.
Yes, it was either Gabe or Adam. I feel like it was Gabe, though. And it came up to their turn, and I was like, okay, blah, blah, blah. You know what's really hot right now is K-pop. And immediately knew that whoever it was not the person I'd heard in the hallway singing K-pop.
Yeah.
Because that's why I threw it out there, because I thought I was setting them up for success. And they did the best they could, but it was the last one. I thought I was teeing up something they were going to knock out of the park. And they had never done that before. And in the green room, I was like, I am so sorry. I thought I heard you doing K-pop like in the bathroom or in the hallway or somewhere around here. And I thought
that's where you got the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, a home run. And they're like, not me. I'm so sorry.
No, it is such a complicated issue, though, right? Of pitching to strength, but also pitching to playful sort of unknowns. So we still play in the studio often, and I would say I get opera for that maybe 70% of the time, and then maybe Broadway musical for the other 28% of the time. Right? Like, and it's meant lovingly. And do I enjoy doing those two things? Sure. I may be a little better than average at those ones than other colleagues in the space, so that makes sense that those are the ones that I'm getting. But I remember vividly getting a Bruce Springsteen challenge one time, which is so left field for me. Again, just how I code in the space. I code very foreign. I don't try to hide that from the audience. And it's one of those I still remember because I've not had that much fun in that game for quite some time. And just playing with the tropes of, I forget what, for your listeners who don't know, in the studio, we just get a children's song or something and then we revamp it with different styles. And so I don't remember what the bass song was, but I just remember threading a lot of, for me, Springsteen's nationalism is quite laudable.
Yeah.
It's loving, it's not the much less laudable iteration that has been sweeping our shared country. But I remember ending it with like, and bleeding red, white, and blue, and just like really embracing the Americana of it, and just leaving feeling like a giant, like I'd done something I'd never thought I could do. And that could have been, like, well, K-pop, I think, is probably, see earlier note on dialects. I think K-pop's problematic maybe for many reasons, but also that could have been the story. And that's the world we choose to skate in, is that I think what makes ensembles thrive, though, is that you learned that lesson, so wouldn't give that choice to that improviser. Again, in an unhealthy ensemble, you would have an attitude of repercussions be damned, I'll call what I feel like calling, and you'll do it, like, and I don't think that's a lot of improv troops, but I've certainly felt those competitive energies in the space.
It's not something I would have thought to call, even had I not thought that I had heard them doing it well.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's that thing again of like, how do we set each other up? Yeah.
In your estimation, what makes a good scene partner?
Isn't it surprising through context? Like, that's the phrase that just hits me in the face when you say that. So it's like someone who's playing the context, obeying the rules of the world, digging into the given circumstances, and yet while they're doing all of that, their obvious surprises you. And so it's not necessarily deliberate on their part, unless you can call an unconscious instinct deliberate. So again, like Robbie setting something on fire, setting the space on fire. I'm like, what the hell? Would never have thought of that. And then we look back on that particular run and go, and the mother was represented by an ashtray in the club and had given him a cupcake with a cat. There's all this foreboding that we had inadvertently done in that 50-minute set. That, of course, the brewery is lit on fire. Do you know what I mean? You look back at that as like, how could it have been any other choice?
Right.
And yet, I would never have thought of that choice in that moment. And that was Robbie's absolute obvious choice. And I'm like, and that is brilliance for me. Speaking to that particular performance relationship, and that's why I can't get enough of doing that show with him. It's like, you have surprised me, but it's not a careless surprise.
Right.
And so that keeps me going back from when we've referenced Chris Dinger's name as well, right? He's another who has just as sometimes laced with a mischievousness. So it's obvious, but obvious from his delightfully twisted mind.
Yeah.
And would be 3 removes perhaps for you as a scene partner, but it's still like, no, I see what you're doing. That choice is coming from somewhere. It just would never come from me.
Yeah.
No, I think those are my favorite folks to play with. Those are my favorite folks to chat with, right? That's a good conversation.
I love that turn of phrase that you said, I tried to write it down, but I'm probably going to get it wrong. But the people who their obvious surprises you.
Yeah.
I love that idea. And you're right. And I've quoted this before, but it's something I quote often anyway. But Dave Rosowski said that the only mistake you can make in improv is casting. And
yeah.
And I feel like that's a big part of it, because you don't want a team full of Davids. Like you said before, if you could clone yourself, that's not a great improv team, because everyone's going to be on exactly the same page.
Yeah, and I've made that mistake of casting someone who you believe quantifiably is more talented, even though I've known that interpersonally they're tough, or they're really hard on themselves to the point it becomes toxic in the environment and starts to affect other people's joy and playfulness.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's a mistake. You want to say you only make once, but you don't. It's easy to be lured by the shiny object in the playground and be like, no, that one. And sometimes, as a director in particular, it's like, no, you're being lazy. You need to polish the less obviously shiny object, and that's your job. That's your job, is to bring that out of them. And if they're going to be a good team player, then yeah, I love that. I do think there are other mistakes we've talked about, but yes, I do agree that ask me to do some dialects for the end of this interview, Stephen.
That's the dialect roller coaster is the last question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self, if any?
Yeah, keep going. It'll be okay. And follow your passion. I think a lot of people, even now in my professional career, I can sometimes feel colleagues are like, yeah, but when are you going to direct a scripted piece, David? We'd like to see you do. They just don't understand that in some ways this field has chosen me. And we only talked briefly about LSU, but one of my big discoveries at LSU, my first year of doctoral studies there, Stephen, was honestly one of the most miserable in my life, because I had persuaded myself that it was time for me to be a serious academician at that point. And so I wasn't doing anything vaguely performance-based or anything improv-based. And then in my second year, I founded that troupe, the Improvisers, and everything turned around. Just everything turned around. And so sometimes we put up those boundaries for ourselves as well. And I think improv is uniquely challenging for those of us, for so many of us who have been bitten by this bug. There are very few obvious paths that will lead you to a living income in this field. Like I was saying just recently to someone, it's like, has anyone been paid for performing a Herald? And the fact that I can ask that question without certainty of the answer speaks a lot.
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Because so many Herald models are house teams who are paying the coach to be there, or paying for the space, or their friends are paying, so in a roundabout way they are actually paying. So I think that's a challenge. I think there are too many voices in all of our heads telling us to get a real job, to do real things. And this happens to me as a teacher on a uni campus, is that especially truly loving, well-intended parental voices with the what will you fall back on if it doesn't work. Like, absolutely understand that. I understand more and more as my son gets older and older. It's like, yep, would I give him the advice I'm giving the student who's the child of someone I don't know, who I'm going, you do what you want. Like, why would I? But the thing I often say in those conversations is that I think the conversation we don't equally have is, how are you going to feel at 35 when you did that job you didn't really feel good about, and you're stuck, and you've closed all the doorways to your passions and your hobbies and your interests. So it's not even that I'm advocating create an improv commune and never get a real job. It's not that at all. That would be delightful, however. But it's more a case of, I don't think as people we prioritize passion enough, and that I think there can be a sense of, but if you're not the best in that risky field, why would you even go into it? But I think that's a really product-orientated view of life, as opposed to a process view of life where, well, you may not be the best in that field, but is that what the field needs? The field may need you with all your imperfections, and your imperfections alongside someone else's imperfections might actually be incredible chemistry that could make a difference. And even if that difference is just in your and their lives, that's worthwhile right there.
Absolutely. Well, what is your favorite type of character to play?
Oh, I think it would go to when I surprise myself out of context. Like we were talking about the Bruce Springsteen song, which is not something that I should have probably done on some quantifiable level. But I like to surprise myself. I think if people looked at my body at work, and why would anyone ever do that? I think I do incline towards sort of vulnerable, emotionally traumatized characters. So that might be a favorite line to play in. I think that is my gentle therapy in some ways, like playing out my fears and my hopes and aspirations. Like I think I do, especially in my long form work, I tend to bring that. But there is something joyful just about being the Shakespearean jester, though, just being the absolute wordplay fiend and finding those veins of truth and comedy. Yeah.
If you could do a scene with anyone living, who would it be?
Well, today you, because I miss you. I'm not a big bowing at the altar of celebrity. Well, there are two answers. One would be former students and folks like yourself who I just haven't played with for a long time. So our mutual friend Anna, who I think you've interviewed as well, I just suddenly saw she's on the schedule for one night in February down here in Orlando, and I happened to be in that night. So that was like, well, that's joyful. And then I think the more esoteric, theoretical would be someone who wants to play with me, someone who's excited to play with me back. I think that would be the person I would want to play with.
I love that. If you could do a scene with anyone who is no longer with us, who would it be?
I've always been scared to meet my improv heroes, so I do have a what if with Keith Johnstone. that because I came to improv through theatre sports in New
Yeah.
Zealand, his writings and teachings and fingerprints are so all over my craft.
Yeah.
And before he passed, like, there wasn't an easy opportunity for me to do a workshop with him. There wasn't like one in town and I passed it up. And it would have involved some effort and travel and putting monies together and stuff. And then when I taught long enough that I had the resources to maybe make that happen, there was just this fear of, oh, what if he's not what he has become for me?
Yeah.
And I think everything I've heard, he's a lovely fellow and a really astute director, and so this is in no ways casting aspersions on his memory, but I had just that real fear of, oh, what if that doesn't live up to what I want? And so there is a little bit of regret. I feel the same with Augusto Boal. I think he was at a conference that I could have gone to, and it's like, oh, I should have gone there, just to be in that space. So it may have not been playing within our traditional short form, do a forward reverse with them, but I think playing with them in terms of getting to be in the room with them, and then that list would then lengthen to include Viola Spolin, and I was lucky to at least meet Josephine Forsberg, that was her direct descendant. So I've had a few one removes from some of these names that we all know and love. But Keith was the one, especially with him just passing in the last couple of years, I think that's the one that jumps to mind.
If you could do a scene with anyone fictional, who would it be?
I would say Shakespeare. Well, he's not fictional, but maybe my version of my imagination, so one of Shakespeare's characters then.
Okay.
Some iteration, because I love that world so much, and it would probably be so humbling when I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good at this Shakespeare improv, and then I'd be suck compared. But I think that would be an amazing world to slide into.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say something profound about the existence of an actual literal Shakespeare there for a second.
Oh, no. That was me responding to your question without actually thinking what fictional and non-fictional were. Do you have those little blindnesses in your, like, that's one of mine. When you say fiction and non-fiction, it's like when you've got a kid and you say left and right and they always have to look at their hands. When anyone ever, still to this day, I'm 52, when they say fiction and non-fiction, they have to be non-fiction. That's the one that's true, right? And fiction is like, So you caught me in a true moment of just being delightfully ignorant.
Who do you think you'd have more fun with then? Would you have more fun with Richard III, or would you have more fun with Puck?
Oh, well, I don't know if I'd survive improvising with Richard III. Like, I don't know how far we're extending this imaginary interchange, right? If he saw me even vaguely as a threat, which he probably wouldn't. But I think to tease out the question behind the question, I think I probably would find it more fun in a dramatic setting and finding the lightness in the drama. So I think I probably would incline towards a more tragic or dramatic figure.
What is the most helpful from the booth?
Listening.
Love it. What is the least helpful from the booth?
Looking for the perfect cue that happened 35 seconds ago. And those two things are so connected, because then they found the perfect cue, but it just can stab the scene because the scene's moved with ebbs and flows. And it's always well-intentional. Like, I have my respect for the booth is enormous. But yeah, those are the two big things. Like, when we were warming up for R&D this last, I think it was a week ago, Austin Nichols was our tech, and he is fantastic. And I'm also hoping I'm pronouncing his last name correctly now, actually, because I don't know if I've ever heard it said. But even just in our warm-ups, when we were talking about things, he was pulling up what we had talked about, like just 4 seconds prior. I was mentioning a Mamma Mia rendition done by an Australian on Australian Idol. I don't even remember the context for. Oh, I think we're just talking about really taking our time with songs and finding the emotion in them. And it's like, yeah, that reinvented a Mamma Mia song for me in a way. And then suddenly it's playing in the background, and that was just us chatting. It was like, oh, that's deep listening. And in the little clip you've seen, if you ever get back to that, he was the tech of that night for that captured R&D show, and was brilliant. So we did the scene straight, quote unquote, and then we replayed it 3 times. And in the straight scene, I'd thrown liquor in my brother's face, and then again, and then I dropped the glass. Well, what he did for the replays is he just teased forward the breaking of the glass. So in the second replay, it broke the first time I threw it. So suddenly that shattering sound is happening right when we're not expecting it, because we're expecting to get 2 more beats before that happens. So it's that surprising within context again. And the audience laughs, and we nearly laugh because it's so funny. And then in the third replay, I'm like, I'm going to go and make these drinks very carefully backstage, and it has the shatter sound happen before I even make it to the stage with the drink. And it's just like this incredible playfulness that is attentive and additive. And as improvisers, we're often not sure if something's going to be additive until we've done it right. We're like, ooh, nope, indulgent. Didn't help at all. And again, boy, I could list a long list of good technicians at
Yeah.
SAC. Yeah. So I feel by singling out Austin, I don't want to in any way eclipse others, but just that's the moment that stood out, that is just like, yeah, that's the perfect marriage to me and Robbie playing this scene straight and then having this mischief maker in the booth just making us look so good and keeping us in the moment.
Yeah, we delighted in that as well. And I remember, I mean, the third one as well, you were about to poison Robbie, and you were unable to do that because you broke the glass.
Yeah. So it was just this true sense of, well, and we've talked about, I do think as the linearity of me, the storyteller in me. I teach actor script analysis on campus, so I'm very much about ignitions and rising actions and climax. So I can't help but have some of that. It's just in my DNA as a theatre practitioner. And so, yeah, exactly. I thought I'd done this clever thing of I've set up the poison, and then in the most beautiful way, it's disrupted.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, not going to be that. All right, it's going to be something else. It's going to be something else.
Yeah, I love that moment, both because he made the glass shatter, but your acceptance of it, too, because another actor could have just grabbed another glass, because I'm not going to let go of this. I'm still going to poison him. We'll just grab another glass or whatever. But you were like, no, it's ruined. I can no longer do this thing that I planned to do, and you had to live in that moment. I loved it on both sides of that. Both the offer and the acceptance were great.
Well, and those are the moments we live for as improvisers, right, too,
yeah.
Right? Because, like, the fact that that moment stands out for us in a sea of choices. You've seen a not great YouTube video of a hopefully greater show, and those moments do stand out because you're like, yeah, there is a synergy there that's magical. Yeah.
I also love that he was able to get one more glass breaking in at the end of the show. One of you threw another glass, and he had it queued up.
Yeah. No, he's just smart. It's very, very smart. And in the end of the Shakespeare rendition, when we reached a happy ending, he just sent an arrow bolt sound. And it was the same thing. It was like, well, one of us has to get hit by it. So Robbie turned, I think, again, in a split moment, that's that moment of magical ensemble that if we'd both hit the ground, it would have been funny, but perhaps for the wrong reason. Like, we've both been hit by one arrow. But the fact that I took the arrow, Robbie took the reaction, and it all just happened in a split second with a completely unpredictable choice. Yeah. Oh, improv.
Other than laughter, what audience sound do you revel in?
Oh, that. An awe of recognition.
Yeah.
In this show last night with I call them student improvisers, but that feels almost like it is not celebrating their level of performance ability. They're just improvisers. They just happen to be students at the moment as well. But they were in a gym for complicated, we get askfuls from the audience and have to use them reasons. But it was the characters of Grace and Emmy. We use our real names in that venue usually. And it was the flat out battle between the two of them, of Emmy revealing that she was jealous that Grace had ended up with Morgan and married, and Grace sort of standing up for herself against Emmy and her behavior towards her. It was a pretty cool setup that they'd found themselves in, but then they just had one revelatory moment after another, and the audience was just like, ooh, oh! And it's almost comedic in that I was sitting there on the sides just watching like a proud papa, but it's like, oh, they got an awe, I love those. Oh, they got two. Oh, they got three. They got four. Oh, there's not another one. They got five. Okay. Oh, there was and like these were coming one line after another. They were just in the best improv way, one-upping each other. Do you know what I mean? But one-upping each other, not with showy offiness.
Yeah.
But one-upping each other with a vulnerable revelation of like, well, you got married, you have a child, I'm in a job I don't even like, it's like they were very emotionally cathartic revelations, and just seeing the audience, like it really was just an impeccable improv scene in any venue. I would have proudly placed that in any show I've ever been in or directed, and the audience was so awing their way through it, and it was deep and intelligent and emotional material, and the humor, if it was there, was the darkest kind of humor. There was no one making jokes. So yeah, I love awes. I love that moment where someone's touched by the energy of what they're seeing on stage.
I feel like those moments for me are one of the things that amazes me about improv, especially in terms of in the pantheon of types of theater and things that you can do on stage, is when those moments happen in an improv scene, you have somehow from absolutely nothing made an audience believe what they're watching on stage and see things that don't physically exist in that space because of the work that you're doing. And it's amazing.
And you've created it then.
Yes, yeah.
There was no moment to go away and go, what would make this really effective? You were talking about the curse moments, right? The moments that sit with us as improvisers, and Jay's response to that in terms of just the litany of improv he's done, right? So you tend to remember the highs, only the highest highs and the lowest lows. But that for me really is one of the gifts of this form, is in that audience leaves after those moments knowing that that was just for them.
Yeah.
And as we look at a post-COVID world, a lot of theatres have taken, Sat Comedy Lab included, taken hits in terms of attendance and bouncing back from those difficult days. Those are the moments that I'm like, yeah, but this is literally irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And even we both could name some decent improv online or that's been broadcast, but it's not the same because you can rewatch it again and go back and rewind and look at your favourite bits. That's now a product. It was created through improv. I'm not like such a purist that I don't think it's improv at all. But for me, that was created through improv. Once it's captured, the magic goes because it's no longer sort of dialogic. It's not connecting with the audience. The audience isn't a co-creator anymore. You're just a consumer.
Yeah. And this, I think, is what you said in different words. You can capture part of it on screen, but you can never capture the feeling in the room that created some of those moments. Those are lost in the digital bits.
Yeah.
That can't be created because there's a feeling in that room between the audience and the players, like you were saying, and that you can't get through the screen.
I don't think it's coincidental that I think what Whose Line does is remarkable. It's remarkable. And that is improv that is largely comedic in nature because they are exemplary comedians.
Yes.
And they are also exemplary improvisers. And that is really rare. And that is why the Whose Line cast has not suddenly expanded to include hundreds of people, right? It's like that's a very rarefied skill set. But I get a little concerned, though, when it becomes the poster child or the exemplar of the form itself.
Yeah.
And so I do worry, and this is a lot of my educational mission on campus, is when I teach my intro improv courses, I joke that for the first half of the semester I'm teaching them sort of what improv is, but it's very much what they think it is. It's a lot of short form stuff that I can use as delivery systems for bigger concepts. And then for the second half of the semester, I break that model pretty much every week. I'm breaking it in a different way. It's like, okay, so you think improv is this, it also can be this. You think improv is this, it can also be this. And then we do dramatic scenes, we do scenarios that they have written from their own lives. Like, I'm just giving them a whole bunch of radically different experiences so that they don't leave the semester going, oh, this is the only type of improv that is valuable.
Yeah. Oftentimes, when describing improv to someone who doesn't necessarily know what it is, one would say, have you seen Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah.
What's a better or a different way to phrase that is accessible to people? Or is that the gift of Whose Line?
Yeah, it's the gift and the curse, because in comparing yourself, you're also comparing yourself. You know,
Yeah.
who here has seen Whose Line? Well, none of us are as talented as Wayne Brady, but that's what you're going to see is approximate some of his worst moments live in front of this. You know, like it's a double-edged sword. So,
Yeah.
but I know what you mean. Like, we still do that on corporates a lot. That is the reference point. But I did a gig for the graduate school, the MBA Crummer at Rollins recently, and with Chelsea, who you know and love as well. And we just dispensed with most of that. We're like, all right, it was sort of a corporate workshop with a bit of a show up the front, but we ended up just dispensing with that bit almost entirely. It's like, we're going to show you what improv is, and then we're going to talk about how it relates to you and your business lives and your personal lives, and sort of trusted that they will make the connections, because as soon as they've seen us do a chart song or something, they're like, oh, okay, it's that thing.
Yeah.
And if they have the reference point of Whose Line, they're going to make that connection themselves. And if they don't, then that reference isn't helpful anyway, right? So, you know, but it is interesting. Like, don't you wonder on some level, like, would we even be having this conversation if it wasn't for that show? Like, and not to overstate its significance on the improv landscape, but I don't think we are. In the same way that I don't think you can overstate the significance of Saturday Night Live for sketch comedy.
Right.
I just think in North America, without Whose Line, and the original British series would probably be the same for the British Isles. It's like they are the reference points. And we were talking about aspirational stuff, and I think it's also even if that show is no longer in production, I think for many it's a driving factor of maybe one day I could be doing something like that. My mother sees it, and I was like, would you ever, say, oh, Mum, it's just such a different thing. Yeah.
What is the worst venue you've ever played in?
Oh, it's going to be outdoors and unair conditioned and hot with mics that are problematic and a poorly assembled audience, so they might be itinerant and moving. And so I'm not thinking of a particular moment. I'm giving you the hellscape that is a conglomerate of multiple, usually away gigs, right, or corporate gigs.
Yeah.
Again, probably I can tell you after we've stopped recording. I'll tell you the name of the institution. It most definitely was not Rollins, but I was doing a corporate away gig for another college, and right before we went on to do our silly make-em-ups, as Chelsea likes to call them, it would have been the president or the dean or the provost, right? Like some high-up figure comes out onto the stage and lambasts a young man for wearing a baseball cap inside and says that is disrespectful. We will not have that kind of behavior on this campus. You are embarrassing yourself. I think it was a faith-affiliated college. It may not have been strictly. So it was just fraught with all of that energy. And please welcome SAC Comedy Lab. Do you know what I mean? So, in terms of the coldest shower I have ever had to step through to get to an improv show, and especially on an educator level, I was like, that is almost criminal for me as an educator. Shaming a student publicly is traumatizing like few things can be. And I can think of very few moments that I think that is even vaguely valid as a teaching technique.
Yeah.
Even vaguely valid, because you will have those moments as a student that you remember where your thing was read out in class as the bad example or something. You remember those moments for life. So yes, I was traumatized as an educator, and then as an improviser, it's like, and now we have to be fun. And that poor young man with the baseball cap.
And that provost went on to warm up the crowd for Stephen Colbert.
Yeah. Quite fun. And I am that provost now, Stephen. Yeah. No, you with that provost. Yeah. This has all been my devious effort to just tell that one shaming story for you. Yeah. No, it was, but it's also just, again, reminder of the importance of play, and also how dangerous play is. Knowing the moment that we're in right now. It's a really difficult political moment, and it was actually a scripted theatre course that I was just going through Aristotle's Poetics. Look at that glorious stuff. But talking about the birth and the beginning of Western traditional forms. And then I was like, look, it's easy for us to dismiss this as unimportant, but historically, theatre, just putting on the clothing of someone else, has been extraordinarily dangerous politically, because when we do that, we call into question these institutions that would oppress us, whether that is we're taking on the garbs of religion, so therefore we are reminding people that the priests who preach on the pulpit are just people like we are. If we're wearing the clothing of a different gender, we're reminding people that gender is fluid and changes and is malleable. So just the act of performing is really an act of protest and can be quite powerful. And I found myself, that's not part of my stump speech for that class. That's a class I teach every semester. And I think I was very aware in that moment of non-binary students and that classroom and legislation that had just been very recently passed to make them invisible.
Yeah.
And it just struck me that as we can laugh about improv, but boy, there is a power there that we can say, you know what, you don't get to script us, you don't get to control this message. And I will stand on the stage and I will speak this truth, and you will yell out hate speech at my stage, and I will respond with love.
I can understand why you'd want to do a scene with Augusta Boal.
Yeah. Sorry, I've flushed myself a little bit in that moment. And so I think, I really respect what you're doing with the Improv Autopsy and these kinds of moments where we also just take a deeper dive and a look into these things, because I think it's easy when something is good and something is fun and something is joyful, there is a segment of society that almost relishes dismissing it as somehow being less valuable because it's those things. And that's been the history of comedy through the ages, that tragedy is the serious and the noteworthy form that should be studied, and comedy is that other thing that you can take it as an elective possibly. So anyway, I've been really reminded of that lately as I've been in spaces with really beautiful community in the face of a difficult political moment in this country. That I'm like, there's value, there's real deep and lasting value to this, and we need to do a better job as a community in sharing that good word.
Yeah, the theater is very powerful in general. I feel like it's one of the few places where you can enter feeling one way and leave feeling something else, or enter thinking one thing and leave thinking something else.
Yeah, I love that. That was much more succinct than my diatribe. Well done, sir.
No, I love what you said as well. What is the best note or the best words of wisdom that you've received?
Or maybe do less. I think I'm a very busy-minded improviser, so sometimes it's just doing less. And I think in doing less, you make space. In that space, others can do more. And that would be the advice I continue to need today. Definitely, I would continue to need that advice today.
What is the least helpful note you've ever received or can conceive of?
Oh, just in the tropes of this conversation, be funnier.
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like we talk about actable objectives in the acting classroom, what's an actable objective and what isn't. So like trying to be famous isn't really an actable objective for a young artist. Like what do you do to be famous? That is the result of things, not the thing you can actually head towards. In fact, if you're heading towards it, you're going to be infamous. Like you're going to have succeeded at becoming well known, but almost definitely for a reason you'd rather not have become well known. So I think being funny is almost unactable, because what the hell does that mean? And funny is such a, arguably it's the most subjective thing. My mother did a lot of helping students who were ESOL, like English as a second language students, and I think it was her that said humor is one of the hardest things, it's one of the last things to teach when you learn a new language, because it's all the subtleties of inflection and homonyms and wordplay and all of these nuances. So I think, sure, you can spend your time using improv to become funnier. I imagine quite a few people do that, but it doesn't seem like the best use of the discipline.
Yeah, and like you were saying, very hard. Like, okay, that you gave me that note. What do I do with that?
Yeah, when you think about us right now, like we're having some pretty big belly laughs, and I don't think either of us like can't wait to crack Stephen up in this conversation. Here are my notes.
Yeah. I'm turning this into my hot five.
All right.
I'm gonna go do an open mic after this. Incorporating all the stuff.
Yeah, all of this stuff. So anyway, performance is an act of revolution. Oh, wrong hot five. Just an audience of people weeping in the theater. Gosh, wouldn't that be a set to do though? Like to do a stand-up set, and your goal is just catharsis, and just to have them crying with you by the end of it. Maybe that's therapy, and I think that is how I use my improv now that I think about it.
Okay, if there were an Academy Awards for everything improv, what would you be nominated for?
What I would like to be nominated for, it's sort of more like a eulogy moment, is most likely to lift up their scene partner. That is what I would like to be nominated for.
Okay.
I don't think I can claim that every night I play at all, but that I think it's that awkward moment in an improv night when you've been on fire on stage and you feel really good about the scene, and you get into the green room and you look at your castmates and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I talked over everyone in this room. Those. So I think that the opposite of that feeling when you're going backstage and you're like, I thought of that joke and I handed it to you because I could see in your eye you'd thought of it as well, and it made so much more sense for your character to say it. Not that we think of jokes. We're all about narrative, story, and relationship. Footnote.
Yeah.
I think if I was trying to be less profound, I would say that I think if you look at me at SAC and see what people ask me to do on the SAC stage time and time again, it would probably be my Shakespeare or my singing improv. Those are probably the skills that are a little more obvious, but I'd like to think those aren't tricks. I'd like to think I've got deeper improv training, and that's just this fun icing I put on top of the other stuff that I do.
Yeah, and I would say that I don't think they're tricks, because if they were tricks, everyone would be doing them.
Well, that's a nice way of thinking of it. Well, and going back to the that would be the other thing I'd love. It'd be the person who made me think or feel.
Yeah.
Because even in our short form, we can do that. I've had moments definitely in short form shows where I'm like, yep, that was a bit real, and I'm a bit flushed, or my scene partner's a bit flushed. We actually found something there that was beyond the obvious. Yeah.
You may have already answered this, but the last question is, if you are remembered 100 years from now for something improv related, what would you want it to be?
I would love, and I think this is as you get to a certain age, you start to become a little legacy focused. I forget who writes about that, sort of the phases that we go through. And at my age, I'm probably starting to lean into legacy phase. So I think I'd love to be remembered as someone who moved the art form along, even if it was just a few inches, but someone who is working to move the art form along. And as a teacher, I think realistically that'll be with my students, that at this point I'm probably not going to quit teaching and start my own devoted improv company,
right,
unless I win the lottery tomorrow. As a teacher, I find a lot of comfort and hope in that there may be little things I've said or done or doors that I've helped open, and that they will help. That they'll start there. They'll start a few steps further into the journey than I did because of just the historical moment that I was starting my journey, that I can hopefully start them a few further steps along and make them or enable them to believe in the power of what this is. And I'd also love, wouldn't it be nice if theatre programs across all of the hemispheres were teaching improv alongside scripted theatre without some sense of apology or dismissiveness? And I don't think I have the power to do that at all, but again, wouldn't it be nice if my fingerprints felt like they were on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it for this interview with Dr. David Charles. Check the show notes for links to David. And if you're wondering if you should bring him to you for workshops or to direct one of his long forms, the answer is yes, you should. If you're an artistic or executive director of a theater, put him in your season and bring him on as a guest director. Your audiences will thank you. You can contact me at improvbrain@gmail.com for any questions, comments, or interview recommendations. If you like the show, please review me wherever you listen, and as always, thanks for tuning in to Improv Autopsy.